Hello and welcome to this week's edition of South Coast End Zone. I'm Tim Weisberg.
I'm Lori Loss.
And we are here to talk with you about the action in South Coast High School football, and hopefully you can see us this week. Yes. I don't know what happened last week. You know what it is? Is it's because Buddy was here, and the camera was like, oh, no.
I told Buddy you broke the camera.
Right,
so.
Yeah, that's what happens.
And now the camera's working, and Buddy's not here.
7 years bad luck for Mr. Thomas. But we are here to discuss with you what happened last week in Week 1. And week 1 for some teams.
Yep.
And we'll look at what's going to happen this week as well. And we still want to hear from you guys. You know, we had a pretty decent amount of views on last week's show for being an audio-only version, which happened by accident. And
not what we planned.
No, not at all. We definitely want to have a full HD video for you, which we will have now each and every week. So you can watch this on your smart TV and have us at full 70-inch 1080p. And I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can. We have that ability. So what did you think about last week's action? I mean, I guess you could say there wasn't really a lot of surprises. I mean, we expected a pretty dominant Apponequet team. We expected some other teams to struggle.
Yeah. I think the biggest surprise would probably be Bishop Stang. You know, I know Buddy picked Wareham to beat Bishop Stang, and I picked the Spartans to beat Wareham just because I knew how many kids Wareham had lost, and I knew that Stang, did have some kids back, even though they graduated Charlie McKeeman. I figured they had enough talent. It was just whether or not, these kids would step in, and I think that was probably the biggest surprise of the week. And also Fairhaven. I was at that game. I know it was Apponequet won 45-0. And I hate to say the game was closer than the final score because everybody always says that, but it really was. I mean, Apponequet just had some big plays they broke. And Fairhaven, it looks like, maybe the middle of the season they'll be a lot better. Cam Charette, I mean, he looked like he's going to be a really good quarterback, and he's going to be able to lead this team. It's just, they had a couple mistakes, a couple, drop passes, a couple, penalties, kind of a little bit of a sloppy game, but they have a lot of kids back. I mean, not kids back, they have a lot of new names, and not many kids are back, so, it'll take a little bit of time.
There will be some growing pains.
Yeah, I mean, I figured they would probably at least get in the end zone a couple times, and unfortunately they didn't. But they have a week off. This is their bye week, and then they play Voc Tech, the following week. So I'm sure they'll be doing, a lot of regrouping and kind of back to the board, this week and trying to get back on track for that South Coast Conference game next week. So. You
know what surprised me the most?
What?
No Triple E reschedules.
Yeah, I mean, I know that some schools have already, rescheduled their games, or they're already playing on Saturday. I know this week we have a couple games that are early. Friday, 4 o'clock, New Bedford is at Taunton. And then I know Apponequet and DR play on Saturday. That's an early game, I think, 3 o'clock on Saturday. And Old Rochester, I think, is playing on Saturday as well. So I think at this point, some of the areas that have the affected, that are usually affected, they've already gone ahead and scheduled their games to be earlier, even though they haven't officially been told you have to schedule your games earlier. I know Case has definitely rescheduled their games, but they were told that. So.
See, I thought the Old Rochester Lee game, I thought that was actually scheduled for Friday night at 7 o'clock.
No,
but
it wasn't.
It took Lee so long to get here from the Berkshires that they didn't show up until Saturday morning.
Well, it was funny because Saturday, my day off, I went to University of Rhode Island to watch URI play, and there's a couple alumni from the area there, Andrew Kestenbaum from Dartmouth and Charlie McKeeman from Bishop Stang, so I got to see those guys. Charlie didn't get in the game, as far as I can tell. But I was there, I was tweeting live from that game. Buddy was calling me about Old Rochester scores. Derek was sending me text messages about Old Colony scores. So I was right in the middle, thick of everything.
Right, you can't help it.
And I know a couple of people tweeted me and asked me how Raekwon Phillips was doing for Old Rochester. And if I didn't write you back, it's only because I wasn't physically at the game. I had so much going on that I didn't call Buddy to ask him how he was doing. But continue to send us your tweets, and we'll get back
if you
to
tweet us, we will retweet them, provided they're suitable for retweeting. And you can tweet us at SC_varsity, and you can also follow us on Facebook at SouthCoastVarsity.com.
Yes.
On Facebook? Okay,
Yep.
So you can follow us all those ways. Now, you have a new segment that you want to debut this year. We're going to be doing First and Goal.
Yes, we did First and 10 last year, and this year I figured, let's make these matter a little bit more, and
Sure.
let's cut it down to just 4 plays. First and goal. So right.
4 downs with Lori.
Yep, 4 downs. All right, on first down, not only did he score a touchdown, Matt Michael had 75 rushing yards and 50 receiving for Apponequet in a win over Fairhaven. Second down, Nolan Bergeron rushed for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns to spark Old Rochester in a win over Lehigh. Third down, Jared Zuniski led Bishop Stang's offense with 80 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns as the Spartans beat Wareham. And fourth down, Old Colony's Jake Pringle threw for 197 yards and 3 touchdowns, giving him a school record 17 for his career. And the player of the week who got into the end zone is Apponequet's Weston Cohen, who racked up 160 rushing yards on 5 carries and scored 2 touchdowns in a 45-0 South Coast Conference win over Fairhaven. Cohen's longest run came on a 74-yard scamper, and that was on Apponequet's opening drive, and that really set the pace for the Lakers. So, Weston Cohen, you are our player of the week.
I see what you did there.
You like that?
I like it.
You like it?
I like it. That's the new way going forward.
Yes.
All right. Well, why don't we jump right into this week's game? We'll start with what's happening on Friday night. And we have a couple of 7 o'clocks and a 4 o'clock. The first game we'll discuss is Bishop Stang at Dartmouth. That's a 7 p.m. Friday game. That'll be at Dartmouth Stadium. And that's always just, it doesn't matter. With those two teams, it doesn't matter who's having a good year, who's having a bad year. When those two teams meet, it's a battle.
Yeah, and it's nice that the rivalry's been renewed. I know it's been they had a few years where they hadn't played each other, and now they're playing each other. They're it's exciting because there's bragging rights on kind of up for grabs. No matter which team is set to have a better season, it's always a tight battle between these two. And last year, Dartmouth won pretty big, 37-14. I think Stang is really coming in off that momentum of beating Wareham last week. And when I talked to Ryan Sylvia prior to the season, he really stressed how important that Wareham game was of getting that win and having that momentum going into the Dartmouth game, especially with it being at Dartmouth Stadium. And, against Wareham last week, the Spartans found the end zone 4 different times. Matt Golden had a 49-yard touchdown run, and if any of you know, he's Dennis Golden's son from New Bedford High, so that's kind of interesting. Neat little fact there. Jake Landry, he also scored on a 6-yard run, and Jared Zuninsky, I hope I'm saying it right, he had an 8-yard and a 63-yard touchdown runs. So, they got the job done on the ground. They also kept Wareham pretty much in check. Their only touchdown was on an interception return, so, their offense really didn't do...
Actually, I think it was in a punt return.
Punt return.
So they didn't even get a pick.
Yeah, so, so it was a pretty dominant performance by the Spartans, and it's been a while since there's been this much excitement going around for Stang. So, it'll be exciting to see them play Dartmouth this week, which Dartmouth had a bye in week 1. And, a torn ACL has sidelined Dalton Soares. I know we discussed this last week in the season preview at quarterback. So they have a couple different guys. Matt Blue Parlin. Bo Parlin. I'm going to get your name right at some point this season, Matt. I promise. It's between him and Blaine Almeida for the starting QB job. So one of those guys will be the signal caller this week for Dartmouth. And really their top, whoever it is that's going to be throwing the ball, their top target is Nick Simonetti. I think he's like a 3-year or even a 4-year starter. This kid, I feel like he's been around forever, playing, wide receiver and D-back. But he's a tall kid. He's got really good hands. And also Tim Smith. He's back from a torn ACL. He had, all the off-season rehab, and he's ready to go. He's ready to be their top featured back. So it'll be interesting to see how Stang kind of plays against a team that has that experience, has that leadership, has kind of some stars, where Wareham was a team that they'd graduated, I think almost everyone. I think they just have one returning starter from a year ago. So it should be a really good night in Dartmouth. 7 o'clock at Dartmouth Stadium.
Should I put you on the spot and ask you who you think is going to win? We won't do picks for all these because they'll be in the newspaper.
I haven't done my picks right now, but as of right now, and we're on Monday night, I'm leaning towards Dartmouth. But that could change between now and Friday's paper.
I'm just wondering your mindset, because we have a team that we saw, but we're not sure that that's they are the team that we saw. We have a team that we haven't seen, and then you have the whole rivalry thing. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like I feel like it could go either way, but I feel like it's going to be decided by 7 points or less, no matter who wins. Unlike last year, and I mean, like you said, I mean, staying is a lot better than they were last year, but at the same time, how bad was Wareham? Especially week 1, so many new faces. So I think this will be a real test to see, is this staying team for real? Is this a team that could, beat Coyle, compete with Martha's Vineyard and, be in games against Somerset Berkeley and Bishop Fan, which is always a tough conference. So,
absolutely.
So this will be a big game for Spartan Village.
Speaking of big games, the next game we'll talk about is Seekonk Akron New Bedford Voc-Tech. That's a 7 o'clock game. Voc-Tech did not really look so good. No. They came out looking pretty well in their game against Millis Hopedale.
Yep.
And they ran 6 or 7 straight running plays, and then they connected on a screen pass into the end zone, but then that was it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going up against a kid, though, from Millis, who is going to BC. I mean, he's BC bound since he was a junior, and he is a man. Yeah. I mean, he's a full-size, NFL body. Yeah. So when you got to deal with him in the middle against you on defense, I can understand it's kind of hard to get your running game.
Yeah, and I also feel like Millis had a lot not riding on that game, but they dedicated that game to one of their players who had gotten into an accident in the off season and had become paralyzed, I think, from the waist down. And I know they were dedicating that game to him, and also Voc-Tech gave him a jersey to him,
mm-hmm. Well, they're just a classy school.
Yeah, and especially with everything that happened with Andrew McCann a few years ago, mm-hmm. They know what it's like, to be in that kind of situation. And it was really a touching and I'm sure an emotional night for both sides. But I think Millis, maybe had a little bit more, emotion with that night. But like Tim, like you said, Nick Richard, he started off the game real strong. He had that short pass to Jacob Tavares, and he turned it into that 45-yard touchdown. Mm-hmm. But the rest of the game, the offense was kept in check. They had trouble stopping Millis. And I think, I don't know how many straight points Millis outscored them. I guess it would have been
33.
33
was the final score. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a Voc-Tech team that last year I think had three shutouts in back-to-back weeks. Mm-hmm. So I know they're going to want to turn things around. But they face a Seekonk team, which I think might have surprised people in week 1.
1-0.
Yeah, 1-0. They beat Case 44-14.
Wow.
I mean, granted, Case graduated Furtado, and he's not back. But at the same time, I mean, that was pretty impressive. Mike Ludi, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, and their quarterback Nick Lanceletti, I think. I'm not sure if that's exactly how you pronounce it.
He's not watching. So
yeah, well, he might be. You never know.
Yeah.
He had 3 touchdown passes and threw for over 230 yards. Wow. So this week.
If Voc-Tech gave up what they gave up to Millis, then it's very dangerous going against this team right now.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how, the secondary, I think last week, Voc-Tech's kind of, run defense was more tested. This week it'll be more, to see how their secondary can handle, a passing team like that. So it really should be a battle, and hopefully Voc-Tech can get their offense going, because I know they would probably want to do, score a little bit more than just on their, one of their first plays of the game,
right.
Or one of their
the first series anyway.
Yeah, and Sean Aldridge, I don't think he did, we didn't have anything about him in our story from when Coach Chuckelair called, mm-hmm. But it'll be interesting to see what he's able to do this week, week 2, because I think a lot of the offense is going to revolve around, him, being able to carry the ball, so.
And our next game, our final Friday night game that we'll discuss is New Bedford at Taunton. It's actually a Friday afternoon game at 4 p.m. in Taunton. And this is the season debut for the Whalers.
And also for the Tigers.
Oh.
Which I didn't realize that until I started doing my research, because I thought they opened last week. And, so both, we not really know too much of either team going into this. I know both teams graduated a lot of their star players from last year. New Bedford graduated Mike LaJoy, one of their top running backs, and also quarterback Mike Raposa. Missing those 2 guys is going to be a big deal for the Whalers early on. I know at quarterback it's a 3-way competition, and by the time we have the preview, hopefully we have exactly who the starter is.
No, Coach Golden's not going to tell you.
Fingers crossed, Coach Golden, lets me in on who the starter will be. But right now it's between Chandler DeBras, Andrew Raposa, and Eli Condi. So there's some young guys. There's a lot of talent. Whichever one of those guys is starting, he's going to have some pretty good targets. Kevin Nunes is back, and also Steven Azor. So those will be the top 2 targets, as far as wide receivers. And then which one of, like, the other 2 guys that don't start at quarterback, they're going to be playing somewhere on offense and probably on defense.
They're all great athletes, so.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. There's going to be a lot of new faces for New Bedford, but there's a lot of talent on this team this year. So I think maybe the first week, this might be a week where you're kind of seeing where different guys fit in, those puzzle pieces. And like we said last week, winning the big 3 doesn't really matter as far as making the playoffs. So it's getting these wins. So, week 1, this is an important week. You got to beat Taunton. You got to get some points.
And not that New Bedford would ever not want to win, but in the past it's always just been about beating Brockton.
Yeah.
That was kind of the key. And now they don't. Now it's win every game.
Yeah.
So not like I said, not that they didn't try to do that before, but it just puts even more pressure on them now.
Yeah. Well, I think what their approach in past years was, we have to get better in all of these games leading up to Brockton.
Yeah, we wanted to be so that they're peaking when they get to Brockton.
Yeah, and if getting better means you're winning, then that's a good thing. If it means you might have come up short, but you're getting better, that's the same. But Taunton, they've had to replace several starters too from a year ago, most notably on both of their lines and at linebacker. Fortunately for the Tigers, they do have some of their skilled players back. Kyle Madeira, he's back at QB. They also have Domingo Jenkins, who was one of the top running backs last year in the Hockomock League. He had 1,600 yards and 16 touchdowns in 2012.
That's my new favorite name, just for no reason at all. Domingo Jenkins.
Nice. You like that name?
I like Domingo Jenkins.
Well, we might be reading a lot about him if he had this great of a year last year, and we'll have to see how New Bedford, if they can kind of contain him and keep him,
It's a name they don't want to hear a whole lot.
I know they don't want to hear a whole lot of. So, like we said, that game's 4:00 at Taunton High. So if you want to go to one of these later games, I would say go up to jump on 140.
You can go to Taunton, watch New Bedford beat Taunton. Then you can drive to Voc Tech and watch Voc Tech beat Seekonk. There you go.
Or you could go to Dartmouth and watch Staying in Dartmouth. So.
Well, I'm thinking that they're New Bedford fans, so they're going to root for the New Bedford teams.
But then they do play Dartmouth later in the season, so you could scout.
Ah.
There you go.
All right, there you go. So that covers our Friday night action. Now we'll jump over to the Saturday games. Old Colony at Cape Cod Tech at 1 p.m. And the Cougars started the season 0-1, but that reading the story from that game, it sounds like it was one of the best, losses that they've ever started the season with. It seems like, they're ready to really be a contending team this year.
Yeah, and I said this when I went to the practice a few weeks ago, and I saw Jake Pringle, and he looks like a stud. I know his main sport is baseball, but he looks like a football player. Anytime that he's involved with anything, I feel like something good is going to happen. And he threw 3 touchdown passes week 1. I think it was 197 yards. Now he has the school record for most touchdowns in a season or in a career. But they're great on offense. They can score, but they can't stop anyone yet on defense, and that's the biggest problem for the Cougars. I know they had trouble tackling Diamond, and they got themselves into a hole. They were down 2 touchdowns, and then they had to kind of dig their way out of it, and they just didn't have enough time. I think they really ran out of time. But Pringle, he had some great receivers in Saturday's game. Cole Bernier caught 2 touchdown passes, and Drew Moore had the other. And this is a team that I think has plenty of talent, has the potential, but you got to play defense. You got to be able to stop the other team, and you can't put too much on Pringle. Even though he is a stud, and he had a great game, and I think as long as he stays healthy, they're going to get more wins than they had last year. But you got to tackle, and I know they're focusing on that in practice. When I went to the practice, that they were doing all the tackling drills and trying to force fumbles, and but I think this was a good week 1 game for them, even though they didn't win.
They almost did. It was Pringle kept them in the game very very late into the game, and they forced the other team to recover an onside kick to win the game. So. And
the only concern I would probably have is they didn't do so much on the ground. Like, he had this great passing game, but, they probably need, a little
more complement.
Yeah, they need something to balance it out a little bit, and hopefully they'll be able to do that this week against Cape Cod Tech. And Cape Cod Tech, was coming off of an interesting week 1 loss to Bristol Plymouth. They were shut out 37-0, and they turned over the ball 6 times. 3 fumbles.
I like the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, 3 fumbles, 3 interceptions. They had just 22 total yards, or not total yards, 22 rushing yards for the game. Their quarterback, Sean Colbert, though, him and Rob Sears, they did connect a few times. I think Sears had 3 catches, 71 yards, and Colbert had, he was 8 of 21 for 102 yards. But like I said, he did have the 3 interceptions. So this is a team that is prone to making some mistakes. This might be a good week for O'Colony to kind of go out there, defense step up a little bit, cause a few turnovers, and then just ride Pringle's arm to victory. So 1 o'clock at Cape Cod Tech.
1 o'clock at Cape Cod Tech, which is on Cape Cod. I don't know what town it's in. Case at Old Rochester is another 1 o'clock Saturday game, and Old Rochester looking pretty good in their season opener, and they get a chance to go up against an SEC foe here.
Yep, and I know we talked a little bit earlier about Case and starting the season off with that loss to Seekonk, and Seekonk scored 44 points and they only managed 14. But really, Case got off to a strong start against Seekonk, opening the game with an interception, and they returned it for a touchdown. But after that, they were outscored I think it was 44-0 or something. So things fell apart quickly for the Cardinals. And then they did finally get a touchdown late in the game in the 4th quarter by Phoenix Boy. And he was able to, he did have 18 carries for 112 yards, but I'm thinking it probably wasn't against, Seekonk's main, there's probably against their second string. So, to see what this kid can really do.
Will he rise to the occasion?
Yeah, will he rise to the occasion?
Will the Phoenix rise to the occasion?
Yes. Good one.
That's why I'm a writer.
Old Rochester, they had some, mistakes early on in their game against Lee, and I know Buddy's gotten a little bit of flack for saying that Ian Napton's hands were suspect because he had a couple fumbles and bobbled the ball a few times, but he did make up for it, Ian, and he did have a strong rushing attack. He had scored a touchdown. Him and Nolan Bergeron combined for nearly 150 rushing yards, and Nolan had the other 2 touchdowns.
He looked good. He was 3 for 8 on the ground with 3 for 8 passing with like 46 yards. That's pretty good when you can complement the running game.
Yeah. With
that kind of success in the passing game.
Yeah, and another thing is Raekwon Phillips. He didn't even really do a lot in this game.
They didn't need him to.
Yeah, they didn't need him to. And I really think that playing a team like Lee, a team that we're not familiar with in this area, might have been a good thing. Because you can see kind of, okay, what are we doing wrong? What are we doing right before you get into the conference play. And I think for the most part, besides maybe a couple early jitters, Old Rochester looked good.
We talk about going up into the mountains and how the air gets thinner, but it wasn't easy for them coming back down to sea level.
Yeah. Good one, Tim.
Yeah, well, I'm serious. That probably did play into it quite a bit because, they're used to playing out there in the Berkshires and where it's the elevation's higher, and, they're used. It's kind of like when you see the Denver Broncos come to to play in Miami, and it just weighs a little heavier on them because they're not used to that.
Yeah.
So maybe. So now I'm guessing that our game of the week here is and what is this?
It's up for debate.
No, what is this here? Well, obviously we have the Bishop St. Dartmouth rivalry, but it's not really for the league like this game is. Why does it always seem like DR and Apponequet have to meet in like week 2, week 3 of the season? They should. They should be meeting when it matters a little more.
Yeah, I can't remember for how long it's been, but it's always usually, like you said, week 2, week 3, Apponequet, DR, and I know talking to Bob Lomb after the game the other night, Buddy and I were discussing how I'm beating Buddy in the picks after week 1, and Buddy said that I would most likely pick Apponequet to beat DR this week, and Bob Lomb said, well, if she's picked us the last few years, it hasn't been too good for Lori. And that's true. I have picked Apponequet the last couple of years, and they've gotten beat by DR. And it always seems like it's one of those games for Apponequet that it's early. They're not, they have so many pieces coming together that they're not really where they need to be. It's not the right time to have a game so important to the conference standings. And it seems like every year, they get that loss to DR, and then they finish second in the conference, or they finish third in the conference, or they don't make the playoffs. They finish as co-champs.
And DR always comes out like the '70s Steelers or the '90s Cowboys or the Zeros Patriots, where they don't really need to rebuild. They just plug a few new names in and
Dave
keep
Driscoll
on
has
going.
Them going. I think there was like 1 year, like 5 or 6, maybe 7 years ago, where they had a down year.
Which meant they only were like 675 win percentage?
No, I think they only won a couple. My first year, I think the Taunton Gazette, I think they had a down season. They graduated a lot of kids, and I think they only won 1 or 2 games that year. But other than that, I can't remember there ever being a season where they're not in discussion.
So they haven't graduated anybody since then? Is that what you're saying?
They have graduated, but it just seems like these kids, and especially they have a nice mix where they have younger kids in with some of the seniors. So then by the time those kids become seniors, it's like they're 2 or 3 year starters. And I mean, you can say the same about Apponequet. I mean, this year you look at Apponequet's team, and 3-year starter quarterback with Cam Costa. A 3-year starter at running back with Matt Michael. They have a lot of linemen that are 3-year starters.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of that experience. That's because they threw some of these kids in there as sophomores and freshmen.
Right. And it paid off.
And it's definitely paid off. I mean, this game, not to say that the conference title is going to be decided this week, because I know Old Rochester is going to have a lot to say about that down the stretch. But this is a huge game for week 2 in the season.
Absolutely.
Whoever wins this game will definitely have the upper hand. And I know with the new playoff formats, there's a good chance that 2 of the teams in the A division will be able to make the playoffs. So even if Apponequet loses or DR loses, they still have a shot at making the playoffs after this game. But it definitely would be key. Last week, DR beat Bourne 48-21. I know we were kind of tracking it because it was earlier. It was before the Apponequet Fairhaven game, so we already knew going into that game DR won big. Norman Manchester, he had over 100 rushing yards and a pair of touchdowns. He also intercepted a pass on defense. And Nathan Kowalski, he's the quarterback. He threw 2 touchdown passes in that game. So, I mean, they have the rushing attack, they have the passing attack. And I think, from watching Apponequet the other night, they have the same deal. I know they didn't have to do a lot through the air because they were up so big so early against Fairhaven. But Cam Costa, he connected with Matt Michael a couple times. I think two catches from Matt Michael, 50 yards. And I think he only threw 4 or 5 times. I think he was 3 or 4, something like that. But they had, I think at halftime it was like 323 yards of offense. Apponequet. Cohen had 160 yards, 2 touchdowns. Cam Costa got in the end zone on a run. Troy Nanfelt, Matt Michael.
Yeah, pretty much anybody that carried the ball found the end zone.
Yeah, and it was nice to see Peter Larandra get into the game late, and he scored 2 touchdowns, which, if you're looking at it from a Fairhaven point of view, you might have said, why are they trying to score?
Yeah.
But I know...
That's what Apponequet does. They don't call off the dogs.
But it's the second string. Most of the whole team in there. And the
you can't help it if your second string is still firing on all cylinders.
And especially his second touchdown, which came with about a minute left. They just wanted to get the first down so they could run out the clock, and he just broke free. And nobody was catching this kid. And it's it's good for somebody who like him. He starts on defense, but he might not see a lot of offensive plays, especially behind. Like I just named off all those kids that are going to be the stars every week. So if you don't have anything to do on Saturday, which I have a birthday party to go to, and I'm kind of wishing I didn't have a birthday party at 2 in Mendon, Mass. But if you don't have anything to do on Saturday, go to Lakeville, go to this game, tweet about it, because I will be on my phone watching everybody's tweets.
And she'll retweet your tweets.
And I'll retweet your tweets. Send us photos, all that kind of
videos, whatever you want to send.
Because this is a huge game.
Instagram, Vine.
Yeah, any of that stuff. Let us know about it. And early, being the homer that I am, if you had to ask me right now, I'd say Apponequet. That's who I'm going with.
Well, but that's the last thing in the world Bob Lump wanted to hear. But, we're sitting here lamenting the fact that Apponequet has to play DR this early in the season, but because Apponequet plays that style of football where they just keep coming at you, and whether it's second string, third string, they're just going to keep coming at you. Maybe that's why DR likes to play them this early, because it's a good test for them going forward too. So, it's a good. The one thing about that Kowalski though, he's a killer. Well, she got. Did you get it? Did you get the wrestling joke?
I should have, but I.
You can't go home tonight. Your husband's not going to be happy with you.
Thanks a lot.
Throwing
me under the bus.
Killer Kowalski, legend.
Well,
has hands the size of my head.
Tim, now that you don't have as much to do here, you're coming with all these.
I do.
Jokes.
Now I can actually pay attention to what you're saying. I'm like, instead of being over here like buttons. Yeah, that sounds great, Laurie. Buttons.
Well, let us know what you thought of our new end zone this week. I know we're shooting it a little different. We don't have the close-ups. But
which is better for you at home. I mean, it's fine when you're looking at Laurie, but when it's me and Buddy, not so good.
Well, I don't know. I didn't have any makeup on or anything today.
That's all right. I have enough for both of us.
Awesome. Great to know.
All right, so we'll run down these games again real quick for you. Friday night, Bishop Stang at Dartmouth, 7 p.m. Seekonk at Greater New Bedford Vogue Tech, 7 p.m. New Bedford at Taunton, 4 p.m. Then on Saturday, Old Colony at Cape Cod Tech, 1 p.m. Case at Old Rochester, 1 p.m. And Dighton Rehoboth at Apponequet, 3 p.m. Fairhaven and Wareham with the byes this week.
Yes.
All right. So any other business we need to take care of?
No, I think that's pretty much
Again,
it.
follow us at SC_varsity on Facebook, SouthCoastVarsity.com on Facebook. Anything else? Have we set up a PayPal account for people to make donations for us?
No, we haven't yet, but we are hoping to get some kind of prize for each week's Player of the Week winner. So stay tuned for that, and we will not forget Wes Cohen that you won week 1. So when we do figure out what prize that we will have,
we owe you one.
We owe you one, and I'm sure whoever comes out to the next game, once we have that prize, we'll be giving it to you. So.
All right. So send us your tweets, send us your videos, your photos, whatever you can. You can always reach us sports@s-t.com, or you can try the old-fashioned way and give us a call. That works too.
And this week, I do have to say that I am beating Buddy 2 games in our weekly football picks.
She's going to enjoy it while it lasts. I was going to say earlier, that's one reference. We'll see how many times she works it out.
Well, I do have to admit,
it doesn't happen.
When I did come back from the game on Friday night, I was, referring to myself as the champion.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know. It's a little premature, but when I've lost to Buddy the last 3 years and I have a 2-game lead after week 1, I have to at least revel in it for a little while. But if you have any suggestions this week on who you think I should pick, tweet me at SC_varsity, and I'll maybe take that into account. Now that I have a little cushion, I can maybe,
You're just guaranteed Buddy's going to go undefeated for the rest of the season.
The key is if I go undefeated for the rest of the season, too.
Puts the pressure on you.
I think it's on Buddy. Although Buddy did say to me if I did beat him that he would probably retire. So I might throw a couple games later in the season. Who knows? Because we don't want, no one wants Buddy to retire.
No, we don't want Buddy to retire, but Buddy's so competitive and wants to win. I could see him in a Thanksgiving game slipping somebody $20. Hey, let's have the star kid take a breather.
I don't think he would do that.
Just to beat Laurie.
Maybe.
All right, that does it for this week's edition of South Coast End Zone. So until next week, we'll see you under the lights
And in the end zone.